And what was your earliest memories coming to the racetrack as a kid?
Oh, geez. Well, my father was stable at Aqueduct when I was little, but I don't remember that at all. And I can remember coming here to Belmont. I guess the earliest I was about 6 or 7, 1966 or so, as far back as I can remember.
And what's your favorite moment of all time?
I had to be when Onion beat Secretariat in Saratoga.
Yeah.
That was just out of this world for something like that to happen. Beat a horse like that with a homebred horse of Hobo Farms meant a lot. Had mean a lot to the owner, but you know, Mr. Dreyfuss was like a surrogate father to my dad, and for that to happen, you know, it was just incredible, just to witness it.
And what was the energy like when Onion got back to the barn?
Well, we had our football game like we always had. I remember that.
Yeah.
We used to play. We used to, in those days, we used to take the horses out, and when we put the feed tubs in, we'd have a little game of touch football somewhere around. Here it was right here in the chute when we were in this barn. In Saratoga, it was right on the grass plot inside the Clare Court track, close to the barn. And then we had a crew that used to go through the stalls. The last thing we would do is a crew would go through the stalls and pick up the piles right before we left. We had 3 or 4 people go one after the other and go through the entire barn. That's the last thing we did. But it was almost business as usual, you know. It didn't really sink in.
Yeah.
Kind of didn't really sink in until the next day.
Yeah. And you know, can you tell us something about your dad that you never told nobody before?
I don't know. There wasn't much mystery to him. You know, what you saw was what you got. You know, he was a good father. He was so busy here. He didn't have time to go to many. Not that I didn't play any sports in school or anything like that, but my 2 brothers did, and you know, he didn't make many of those games and stuff like that. But he was always there. He was always there when you needed him, but in a quiet way. You know, wasn't. He was stern. He could be stern. He was, you know, you had to behave. That's for sure. He didn't take no shit from you. You know, like that's the way that generation. That's the way that all parents were in those days. You know, different than it is now. It's so permissive, and I don't know how good that is. But you didn't want to cross him. That's for sure.
And you know, how important is the people that do this job day in, day out?
Well, couldn't get it done without him. That's for sure. I mean, 7 days a week it's just a tough thing. I mean, you some of the people get occasional days off and stuff, but it's not. It's an everyday thing. You know, whenever you're dealing with animals, you can't put them in a bubble till you decide till you're ready again and correct. They need constant care day in and day out, and that's not for everybody. That's for sure.
Hey, can you tell me some of the good grooms, man, from back in the days that was around the barn?
Oh, God, my father had so many of them. Jeez, he had a guy his name was Francis Hawkins. We used to call him Paycheck. And his brother was a good trainer in Maryland, Luke Hawkins. And he was fantastic. We had old Duck Butter. His real name was Sloan Price, but we used to call him Duck Butter. I can't, he told me how he got the name, but it escapes me. And probably the best of all of them was a guy named Jimmy Harris. He was a little slightly younger than Duck Butter, but not much. But he was a perfectionist. If the horse was worth $5,000, he'd have that horse done up. If he was worth $5,000 and got beat 30 lengths, he'd get done up. He'd get done up like he had just won the Kentucky Derby. He didn't. He was a. Yeah, he didn't leave there till the job was done the right way.
Wow. And you know, in your opinion, what make a good groom?
Well, you gotta observing. You gotta observe them every day and see any changes. The legs, you gotta look closely at the legs. That's so important every morning, you know, and just have the horse's trust. You know, keep them comfortable. If you expect them to run good, they have to be happy and healthy. And you know, it's kind of you know, it's no real trick about that, but it takes some time. It takes time and a lot of work to do the job right. Most of our grooms came from South Carolina, but for some reason, I mean, or the 3, Virginia, or Maryland, Virginia, or the Carolinas. That's where just about when I was a little boy. God, one of the 3 states. It seems like that's where they came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alvin Darby. We had an old groom. I forgot about him. He was great. He was a little before Sodi's time. I don't think she wouldn't know him, but he was the only one. He was from Louisiana. I remember. But all the rest of them, all the rest of those old grooms were from Maryland, Virginia, or the Carolinas.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot from South Carolina.
And you know, horse racing back in the days versus today, in your opinion, what's the difference?
Well, there's a big difference. I mean, these stables with 200 horses. I mean, it's, you know, they've taken over, and you know, it's hurt racing for sure. I mean, they can deny it all they want, but the more horses you have in fewer hands, it can't be good for racing, because it takes that's less entries you'd have in that's less entries you would have in these particular races. That's why it's so hard for the races to fill. But it's the way it is, and I don't know if there's anything you can do about it. You can't tell an owner who to give a horse to.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's and they make it work. They're extremely successful, and you know, people want to be part of that program. You know, and it's hurt the little guy tremendously. I mean, especially here in New York. It's as expensive as it is to operate here, and it's hard for a guy to make a living here unless you got the volume and the quality.
And you know, you see a horse like Rich Strike win. These guys pretty much are underdogs.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
That, I must admit, that was fun to see.
Yeah.
You know, and I hope he does. I think he's going to do well today. They did. I think it was smart of them to skip the Preakness. You know, even though, you know, he's got that Triple Crown, but he ran so huge in the Derby that, and the track, historically the Pimlico track is pretty conducive to speed horses, and he would have been at a real big disadvantage. So it took you know, they didn't care about tradition or anything like that, or any pressure. They made up their mind quick, and I thought that was pretty cool.
And you know, right, if somebody came to the backside and wanted to get involved in this life, right, how can you spot a horseman from a guy that's trying to pass time?
You can't till you see them in action. Some people are just natural around horses. It's really weird. And then some people they're great employees by showing up all the time, but they're not natural around horses. You know, that's it's just I think it's whether you can learn things, you can learn and become better at it, but you know, you can pick the naturals out right away.
Right away. The Backstretch Award, right? If you could give one award to somebody.
When I was growing up, an assistant of my dad's named Andy 𝐓𝐡𝐞. I looked up to him because he had been on the racetrack for 60 years or so, and he only worked for 2 people in the whole time. An old trainer, you might have heard of him, Fitzsimmons, who had Nashua and Bull Ruler. And when he retired, or he went to work for my dad, he worked for only 2 people he worked for were 2 Hall of Fame trainers. You know,
wow. And
to stick it out that long to just those same outfits, that showed a lot of character and class and character, and I looked up to him. Probably as much outside of my father, probably looked up to him as much as anybody. You know, I couldn't mention wouldn't have enough time to mention the people that are special to me in this. Since I've been in this game, you know, it's through all the changes and everything. You know, you're not supposed to live in the past but you know, it's hard not to sometimes. You see the changes. I guess some are good, but you know, the game's changed a lot for people like me, and I just remember, go back in time and remember how special it was growing up around such a great life, and all the people that. You know, Sodi knows we all grew up in the barn together, and things weren't always smooth. You know, I mean, there were fights, there was, you know, but all in all, when you think back at it, it was just even that stuff. You think about it and you laugh about it now, and it was just special part of growing up, and it's been a great life.
And you know, who's the greatest jockey you ever seen ride?
You know, you know who I think in his absolute prime, if you took all the best riders in the world at their absolute prime, I thought Jose Santos was the best rider I ever saw.
Wow.
When he was in his prime in the 80s, he'd make things happen that were just, he knew he had such a knack for putting a horse spotting a horse in a race where he was comfortable, and you know, he knew when to give him a breather. He knew when to improve his position, and he never had him in a bad, never had him in an uncomfortable spot in between horses. If he, you know, he just seemed to have a knack.
Wow.
I thought he was probably the best I ever saw.